a wartime child, a teenage bride with a terrible secret, and a disinterested mother who watches as she fights for her life. To most people, Joan Collins is the dazzling and villainous queen from Dynasty with exceptionally stylish suits and stares that cut through silence. But behind that screen persona is a life framed together with war, betrayal, survival, and silence. Her beauty opened doors, but it also attracted danger, and more than once, love left her with scars she had to smile through in public. How does one woman play the bad cards life dealt her and still win the game? This is the unscripted story of Joan Collins, and we are going to be showing you some of her rare photos. Joan Henrietta Collins was born on May 23, 1933, in Paddington, London, right in the heart of a world at war. She was only 6 when German bombs first shook her home, a home where she slept with gas masks instead of dolls. Her earliest memories were filled with sirens, burning homes, and strangers. Her father, a theatrical agent at the time, kept moving the family from shelter to shelter, trying his best to keep his wife and 2 daughters safe. By the time the war was over, Joan was a 13-year-old who had gained an interest in the career her father was pursuing on the edge. Joan wanted it all, and she went right for it. By 16, she took acting classes at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, London. And only a year later, Joan was signed to a British film studio called the Rank Organisation. After signing, she took on numerous roles, but one that stands out is her role in I Believe in You. That movie was her official launch into stardom, and Joan was no longer a name for supporting roles. The way her fame and influence grew, it felt like Joan was born to be an actress. But off-screen, something far more tragic was unfolding. Not long before her big break, Joan met actor Maxwell Reed, a man 14 years older. At first, he seemed charming, cultured, and protective. To Joan, his image as a seasoned actor could match her growing fame. But their relationship took a dark turn almost immediately. On one of their earliest dates, he gave her a drink, and by the time Joan woke up, the worst had happened. Maxwell had laced her drink with substances and taken advantage of her. Joan couldn't tell anyone about it. In times like the 1950s, things like that remained under wraps, so instead, Joan married him. Even though she did that out of shame, she hoped that things would get better once they got married. Unfortunately, she couldn't be more wrong. Maxwell not only became more controlling and manipulative, but he was also cruel to Joan. Still, Joan kept quiet, masking the pain of her marriage on the red carpets and hoping for a change of heart. However, in a disturbing moment, Maxwell tried to offer Joan to a wealthy stranger for £10,000. He didn't seem to care, even stating that he could watch the 2 of them. That was the last straw, and Joan couldn't take it anymore. She was only 23 when she walked away, carrying the weight of those early wounds. The marriage ended after 4 painful years, and that same year, she packed her bags and left Britain. She signed with 20th Century Fox and moved to Hollywood, hoping to rebuild. The timing said it all. She wasn't just chasing stardom, she was escaping. Almost immediately, she began landing major roles in Hollywood. The world typecast her as a seductive and glamorous young woman, but what they missed was a teenager who had endured more in 4 years of marriage than most face in a lifetime. Joan was a serial monogamist after that first divorce with Maxwell. She thought she was done loving, but she had no idea she had just begun. Joan was 27 when she met 22-year-old Warren Beatty. He was young, magnetic, and ambitious. She fell hard. They got engaged quickly, and Joan believed she'd finally found someone who would build a life with her. But Warren was never committed to her. Even during their engagement, he openly dated other women. But Joan ignored the signs, hoping he'd settle down. Then she became pregnant. Joan was overjoyed, but when she told Warren, he did not share the enthusiasm. He told her it wasn't the right time. A baby, he said, would ruin both their careers. Joan, afraid of losing him and her standing in Hollywood, agreed to an abortion. This was at a time when procedures were done in secret and potentially unsafe places. Joan later called it the greatest regret of my life. Soon, she realized the engagement was leading nowhere, so she broke it off. Warren moved on, but Joan never forgot the loss of her first pregnancy. Her second marriage to singer and actor Anthony Newley in 1963 felt at first like a breath of fresh air. After the pain of Maxwell Reed, Anthony seemed charming, funny, and brimming with artistic energy. Joan believed this was her chance at real happiness. 5 months after their wedding, they had their first child together, Tara, and 2 years later, Alexander was born. Joan was living the dream, a simple and artistic family of 4. But soon, Anthony's dirty secrets came out in public. Anthony was not just sleeping around with over 70 women, he was using it as inspiration for his movies. He had begun writing disturbing, highly sexual material that mirrored their own family, including scenes that eerily reflected their young daughter. When Joan found out, she was horrified. She didn't want her children to have a broken home, but she couldn't trust the imagination of the man she called her husband. So she picked up her kids and left, and in 1971, they were officially divorced. Joan was tired, but if she had stopped trying to find love at that point, she would have never had her last baby, Katiana Cass. In 1972, Joan married Ron Cass, the former head of Apple Records, who had worked with the Beatles and was one of the few men who didn't seem threatened by her ambition. He wasn't just a husband, he became her creative partner, producing The Stud in 1978, the daring, unapologetically sensual film that marked her comeback. The two of them made bold moves together. They were fearless and, for a while, fiercely in love. But behind that partnership, Ron was wrestling with demons Joan couldn't reach. His growing cocaine addiction was something he kept quiet about at first. She tried to pull him back, desperate to keep her third marriage together, but the distance widened. Then came the day everything changed. In 1980, their daughter Katie, only 8 years old, was struck by a car and left in a coma. Joan dropped everything, camping out at the hospital, whispering to machines and holding her daughter's hand through nights that never seemed to end. The trauma bound her and Ron together in grief, but it also broke something. He spiraled further into substance abuse, crushed by the guilt and helplessness. She stayed strong for Katie, but at home, the walls were caving in. When Katie finally woke up, Joan thought maybe they could heal too. But the damage was done. Ron's addiction tightened its grip, and the man she once leaned on became a stranger in their own house. In 1983, they separated quietly, and the marriage was over. It was becoming like an unwanted routine for Joan: build, burn, rebuild. At 50, Joan was a single mother of 3 children and a 3-time divorcee. When Ron passed 3 years later, Joan was devastated. She also felt lost, especially after the daring role she had played on The Stud. But one person was watching closely, a TV executive from America who needed a villainess to save a failing show. In 1981, Joan Collins became Alexis Colby in Dynasty. She was 48 and on fire. Her performance turned the show into a global hit, catapulting it to #1. By 1983, she won a Golden Globe and became the highest-paid actress on television. But off-screen, she was battling sexism and contract disputes. Life on the Dynasty set wasn't so good, and Joan made sure to fight for her due rights. Otherwise, she was okay, and her career was blooming. But just as sweet things attract flies, Joan was targeted. Peter Holm is a name that is forbidden to be said by anyone near Joan. She calls him her second biggest regret, next to her abortion. Sometimes he is simply referred to as the Swede, but what is certain is that something terrible happened between them. In 1985, at the height of her career, Joan married Peter, a slick Swiss singer. After 3 heartbreaks and 3 children, she thought she had finally found her soulmate. Instead, he turned out to be a snake in disguise. He threatened her finances, mocked her age, and locked her out of her own home. After 13 months, Joan applied for an annulment, but Peter wasn't having it. Joan soon found herself in a legal battle with an abusive and controlling man trying to have half of her assets as a divorce settlement. Still, Joan remained poised, and in a dramatic twist at the court, her lawyer revealed Peter's girlfriend, who eventually fainted on the witness stand whilst giving her testimony. The divorce was settled, and Joan had survived another man trying to shrink her into silence. When Dynasty ended in 1989, the whispers came again. She's finished. But Joan returned to the stage, performed in private lives, starred in comedies, authored best-selling memoirs, and launched skincare lines. Even in her 80s, she refused to fade. In 2015, she was named a Dame by Queen Elizabeth II. Later in life, her body began to protest. She fainted during a Vanity Fair party due to a corset cutting off her air supply. But that was not all the health scares she has had. At 88, her back ached from a trapped nerve that made walking almost impossible. She got COVID twice. In fact, the first time nearly broke her. The second felt like a bad cold, but it still reminded her that no amount of discipline could hold off time forever. But she didn't have to do it all alone. She had someone holding her frail hand. For nearly 15 years after her fourth marriage, Joan was sworn off relationships and marriages. That was until Percy Gibson came into the picture. Despite their age gap of 32 years, Percy offered her peace for her hand in marriage. And in 2002, the duo became man and wife. After several failed marriages, Joan says she has found the love of her life. Even after 23 years, they still wax strong in their marriage. Finally, it is a long-deserved love story for the veteran actress who never gave up totally on love. Now, at the ripe age of 92, Joan barely looks a day over 60. She takes fitness seriously and plans to live at least 8 years more. In fact, she is cast to take on the role of Wallis Simpson in a new biopic, where she will portray the American socialite in the later years of her life. She is still writing and enjoying her serenity. In a town where women above 45 are tossed, Joan has managed to be a woman of indispensable value. If you enjoyed this video, there's a good chance you'll enjoy the one on your screen right now. Click, enjoy, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. See you at the next one.